Welcome back. Today we are talking with Dr. Keith Bellizzi, author of Falling Forward. Dr. Keith, great first segment there. I want to circle back on something, and that has to do is the difference between reaction and response.
Yeah, so let me start with an example, okay? Because I think this is an example that everyone could relate to. We've all had that moment where we receive an email or a text from a friend or a work colleague, and it comes across as critical or perhaps unfair, right? So our first reaction is generally to fire back immediately, right? Um, but instead of doing that, I think what's really important, and this is what moves one from a reaction to a response, is kind of first recognize that you are having some sort of emotional reaction, right? Pause, take a step back, don't respond immediately. And even if you step away for a few minutes, I guarantee that your response would be different than if you immediately responded. And then reflect on what you want that outcome to be, um, and then respond. And whether it's pausing for a few minutes, waiting until the following day, I will say 9 out of 10 times, the email that you send or the text that you send later will be very different from the one you almost sent. And that's an example of kind of controlling your emotional reaction to a threat. I mean, you could think of it as a threat, because if you're receiving a text or an email that feels critical or unfair, oftentimes it's interpreted as a threat, and your amygdala is part of the fight or flight response, and you're trying to avoid that. So taking a step back, pausing, waiting a day, a couple of hours, really helps you kind of get out of that emotional state and respond in a way that's a little bit more informed based on logic and your executive functioning.
What I've done in the past is sometimes I do respond via email right away to get my emotions out. I don't send it. I actually delete who it's sent to, so I can't accidentally send it.
Right.
But I get my feelings out. It's in a draft. And then, as you said, a couple of hours later, I go back and go, no, I don't think that's what they meant. No, I'm calmer. And you're right. That email response that does go out is completely different, a lot calmer, but I still felt good that I got my feelings out, dealt with, and they're out the door.
Right.
Within a minute or two. It's like, yeah, I didn't like that. No, maybe you meant this. No.
Right. You're taking the emotions out of the response, and I think that's really important to do. And the strategy that you use is a great example of how to do that. And again, it takes practice, because I mean, if you think about when you're driving down the road, right, and if someone cuts you off, what's your instinct? Oftentimes, your instinct, hit the horn, yell at the person. But if you think about it, you don't necessarily know where that person is headed. Perhaps there's an emergency. Perhaps they're heading to the hospital. Perhaps, there's a child at home that they need to get to. So by taking a step back and not reacting allows you to think a little bit more logically about the different possibilities, versus the person was just being a jerk.
Yeah, you used a good example there because road rage is a problem, and it is because people use their emotions right off the bat.
Right.
Yes, there are some crappy drivers, but still, you never know someone's circumstance. And
Absolutely.
we kind of often forget that we may be experiencing those exact same things that that other driver is experiencing. You
Yep, absolutely. Even within the context of health, if you are talking to the doctor, you receive bad news. Rather than making an emotional decision with regards to treatment or next course of action, take a step back. Take a step back. Tell the practitioner you need a day or two to think about it. Go home, let the emotions settle a little bit. Maybe do a little bit of research, just so that you can make a better informed decision. So it applies to all aspects of life.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is something that applies to everything within the office place as you're driving, children at school, or even children in the house
Yeah,
sometimes,
yeah, absolutely. Even you mentioned the office space. So even within the work that you do, regardless of what it is, we have these types of interactions every day with individuals. So being able to practice some of these strategies um, is helpful, within all aspects of our lives.
I just had a thought that I have to word this delicately. Sometimes people take that calm perspective that maybe you or I have, where we take some time to think about it rather than immediately using an emotional response, as weakness. But I don't think it is weakness. I think it takes strength to actually take a step back and pause and give the right decision or the right response, rather than an emotional one.
I agree with you 100%. I have two comments I'll make. The first is, if you are in a situation where you think the other person might view it that way, you can be very transparent and say, I hear what you're saying. But I would like, a day to kind of sit on this, process it, and then I'll get back to you with my response. So you could be very transparent, with the person that you may be talking to. And the other is, if you remember the Olympic athlete Simone Biles.
Mhm.
So, decorated gymnast who was competing in the Olympics several years ago. And because of some mental health issues that she was experiencing during the Olympics, she made the very difficult decision to kind of step back and withdraw from the Olympics to take care of herself. And as you said, some people did view that as a sign of weakness. I viewed that as a sign of strength, as a sign of being able to recognize when you need to step back, when you need to take a pause. Because look what happened afterwards. She came back the following Olympics. I think it was in 2024. I don't remember how many medals she won, but she came back
Yeah.
after taking that brief pause and just killed it in the Olympics. So that's a great example of, some people thinking, oh, she should have pushed through. She should have just gone, she should have been tougher. Well, you know, in her case, I think what she did was a sign of strength. It was a
Yeah.
sign of kind of taking care of herself first, and then coming back strong.
Yeah. I think so too. Okay. So let's move on to another thing. You talk about building a resilience network. How do we go about doing that, and what kind of a network are we talking about? Hmm.
Yeah. So when I talked about a resilience network, I'm talking about your support system, your social support system. I think one of the biggest myths about resilience is that it's a solo act. And the reality is, resilient people are often deeply connected people, and they have a vast social support system. And it includes different types of individuals too. So it includes people that might provide emotional support, might provide practical help, um, individuals who might challenge us, when we need to be challenged, and remind us of who we are when we're struggling. And no one person can kind of meet all of those needs. So it's really, really important to cultivate a diverse network of family, friends, mentors, work colleagues, community connections, um, so that all of those aspects are covered. You know who to go to if you need a certain type of support, and you know who to stay away from if you need a certain type of support as well. So that's what I mean by building a resilience network, kind of taking inventory, um, to recognize who's within your network, and also if there's something that's missing. So if you have a support network where you don't necessarily have a person that can help challenge you, um, well, maybe that's what you need to do next. Go out and find someone who you could include in that network, in your network, in your specific network.
And I'm guessing that takes time too. Like it's not something that's quick. That develops over time as well.
It develops over time, but technology and social media, depending on what it is that you're looking for, you could easily find someone to fulfill different social support needs. So, for instance, if you recently lost a job, or if you were diagnosed with an illness, there are groups, whether there's Facebook groups or just social network groups that you can go to get support, um, for whatever it is that you're struggling with. So it's very different than 20 or 30 years ago. When I was first diagnosed with cancer, I was in my early 20s, and I'm dating myself a little bit, but the internet really was just emerging. There was no Facebook. I couldn't find another young adult to talk to. We live in a very different world now with the digital age. So it's much easier today to kind of expand your network, versus how things were 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, and there are still church groups, knitting groups, musician groups, swimming clubs, whatever. Those still exist.
A- a-
Yeah.
Absolutely. And some of them are in person, some of them are online, but they're out there. They're out there. So that's kind of what I mean by kind of taking inventory of who's in your network and thinking about what you need,
Yeah.
and going out and finding support, in those areas.
Yeah, and they can be work colleagues as well, because I know I've seen friendships develop from work colleagues and people, they have a great time. They help each other out, and they join clubs together or curling teams or whatever the case may be. They're closer than you think they are.
Right, right. And it's that shared experience
Yeah,
oftentimes that brings people together.
right. On that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We're talking today with Dr. Keith Bellizzi, author of Falling Forward, and we will be right back.